You don't need me to tell you that the papacy is surrounded by controversy. Allegations, misconduct, corruption. The Vatican has ironically seen it all, and though these officials are meant to be the pinnacles by which the devout look up to, it's not unheard of that many of them have ended up falling short and either angering their flocks through corruption or alienating them through disgrace. Yet the papacy is no stranger to a scandal, even if you go back 1,000 years. Indeed, despite being thought of as benign and/or exemplary, perhaps even a conduit for God himself, popes even in the early ages of history have proven to be polarising figures. Take Pope Sylvester II, for example, who served as the Bishop of Rome in the late 10th century, a man who was renowned for his intelligence, his inventions, and his contributions to mathematics and astronomy. Yes, on paper, he seems like he'd make a pretty wise and versatile pope, but when you factor in that this chap was quite the randy little creature who didn't mind making a pact with a demon or two, well, you've got yourself quite a morally flexible leader who not only comes across like a hypocrite, but is more than willing to swap his allegiance with his God for one with Satan. Today we'll be exploring the legend of Pope Sylvester II, who, according to the works by 12th century historian William of Malmesbury and medieval writer Walter Map, was both a major occultist obsessed with black magic and the willing lover of an actual succubus. Sylvester II, born Gerbert of Aurillac around 946 AD, was celebrated as one of the most learned men of his age. Medieval writer Walter Map describes him in his work Trinkets of the Court as youth distinguished by birth, and that having been raised with the finest education at a Benedictine abbey under monks, was off to quite the series of intellectual advantages. Education was an integral part of Gerbert's life, and despite being ushered into academics very early on in life, it would seem his thirst for knowledge never quite dissipated. However, historian William of Malmesbury, in his work Chronicles of the Kings of England, tells us that Gerbert was either sick with disgust at living in a monastery and of monastic life, or seized with a lust for glory, and so, at the first opportunity, he fled by night to Catalonia, Spain. William of Malmesbury goes as far as to tell us he learned what the signing and the flight of birds portended. There he acquired the art of calling up spirits from hell. From this we can gather that becoming pope was not the gateway to his corruption. By all means, Gerbert was already corrupt. His curiosity and desire for knowledge was so insatiable that it had led him to the occult. Several accounts, including those by William of Malmesbury and Walter Map, indicate that Gerbert became so knowledgeable about so many things that the only area left for him to investigate was sorcery and black magic, which drew him as easily as a flame might do the moth. Gerbert's career was marked by a rare blend of scholarly achievement and ecclesiastical ambition. He became a teacher at the Cathedral School of Reims, where he revolutionized the curriculum by introducing Arabic numerals and the abacus, tools that were virtually unknown in Latin Christendom at that time. He also possessed a keen interest in astronomy and mechanics, reputedly constructing celestial spheres and early automata. To many, these inventions were signs of his genius. To others, at least retrospectively, they might have hinted at some kind of sorcery. For surely, no man could be this smart without some kind of demonic assistance. In 999 AD, Gerbert was elevated to the papacy and underwent a name change as Sylvester II, the first Frenchman to ascend to the throne of St. Peter. His papacy, though brief, was marked by his efforts to ban the selling of church artifacts and offices, as well as the reformation against concubinage amongst members of the clergy. Something you might say is yet another irony considering what he was later accused of. Perhaps it was moves like this that made him an object of suspicion in the centuries that followed. One might argue that the stories about him were merely rumours bruited by disgruntled members of the clergy, those who, under Sylvester's new rules, were no longer allowed to partake in such behaviour. I mean, what better way to undermine and dampen such a new directive than to accuse the initiator of said behaviour himself? Much of the account regarding Gerbert and this supposed succubus is told to us by Walter Map in his work Trinkets of the Court. Here, Map tells us that when Gerbert was at the University of Reims, he fell in love with the daughter of the dean, a girl that pretty much everyone had the hots for. Shooting his shot, Gerbert professed his love for this young woman, who, unfortunately, turned him down. This pretty much sent him into a spiraling depression. In fact, Gerbert took the rejection so badly that he stopped sleeping, stopped eating, pretty much stopped doing anything except lounge about in sorrow. His estate therefore dwindled because he wasn't going to work, and pretty soon he'd accumulated enough debt that he'd never be able to see himself out of it. He became forsaken by his servants, most of whom he had to let go. He was avoided by his friends, who could no longer stand by this husk of a man, and he came to neglect himself so much so that he was dirty, rough, and unclean. Now one day in his misery, Gerbert went out of town at noon for a walk. He was so hungry he was brought to tears, and seeking comfort from any of nature's pleasantries, thought he'd find some respite deep in the woods. Indeed, he found it. He entered the glade and found there a woman of unheard beauty, she who was seated on a large silken carpet and sprawled amongst a huge heap of money. Fearing this to be some phantom or an illusion, he made to flee, but the woman's voice called to him and stopped him in his tracks. She knew his name. She introduced herself as Meridiana, some accounts refer to her as Mariana, and she claimed to have been a noble's daughter, who just so happened to be lying in a pile of money in the middle of the forest. She told Gerbert that it had been her chief aim to have found a man who was of her equal, to have found a man worthy enough to claim her virginity, and to have found a man whom she was utterly attracted to. None had met that criteria, until now. Kind of convenient for Gerbert, but sure, we've let worse things slide. She proceeded to offer him not only herself, but also all the money that she was lying on, which was enough to not only bail Gerbert out of his debts, but also enable him to live pretty comfortably for the rest of his days. She told him, "Since in every point you are pleasing to me, do not delay to accept all the prosperity which the Most High is raining upon you from heaven. His creature am I, as much as you. For unless you compel me to righteous anger, you are now blessed with all possible affluence and rank." Now, there was a condition for this lucrative offer. How could there not be, right? Although the condition really sort of worked in Gerbert's favour as well. Meridiana explained that so long as he agreed to reject the woman who scorned him, for she would indeed eventually change her mind, probably after seeing all that money he's rolling in, then everything he beheld could be his. Gerbert, who'd probably all but forgotten what that woman even looked like now that he'd set sights on money, Meridiana, was all but eager to accept these terms. It's interesting here that Meridiana even kind of gives herself away as being a succubus, telling Gerbert that though it's natural to have reserves over her kind, given their reputation, she's actually one of the good ones, and that whilst the other demons would have tricked him with fleeting fortunes and empty promises, she is genuinely attracted to him, and really does want to make him happy, having become aware of the honesty of his character. Which is interesting, because he's about to tell a whole lot of lies to a whole lot of people. She continues, "I gladly present all to you, and I would have you take away with you what is here, before our union, and come back often to take more, till when all your debts are paid, and you have proved that this is no phantom money, and do not fear to pay the just dues of what a true love has spent on you. To be loved is my desire, not to be your sovereign, or even your equal, but your handmaid." Map tells us that Meridiana had many more words like these, but she needn't have wasted her breath. Gerbert, in all of his greed, didn't even let her finish talking before he'd agreed to all of her conditions. I mean, why wouldn't he? He not only gets filthy stinking rich, but he gets to be in a relationship with a beautiful woman who's loyal, trustworthy, and infinitely admires him. I mean, yeah, he does gloss over the fact that she's a demon and probably doesn't actually look as she appears to look, but Gerbert strikes me as a shallow man, and so long as she kept up the guise, I'm sure he wouldn't have minded much. Remember, he's also hurting from being rejected by the love of his life, so he's probably looking at some form of revenge, if you will, and what better way to show off than with another beautiful woman? Map tells us he was anxious to be wealthy and escape the duress of poverty, and swift to enter upon the beautiful but perilous course of love. In the next few months, Gerbert paid off his debts and pretty much splurged on whatever he wanted. He became reputable as a rich man, adorning himself with all the finer things, to the point that Map actually tells us that his glory was like that of Solomon in Jerusalem. Here we learn that Meridiana wasn't just his financier or his romancer, but also his advisor, instructing him on what he was to do on each day so as to achieve the best possible outcome. Within a short time, Map notes that no one was his equal. He had surpassed all and become so famous that everyone in Rance knew who he was. Now, when she learned of all this, the young woman who had scorned Gerbert was indeed full of emotions. Indeed, she could not understand why she had rejected him in the first place, and couldn't help but become wasted with misery, not at all unlike how Gerbert himself had been. It's interesting that Map actually refers to this woman here as the daughter of Babylon, suggesting that this woman was wicked and not the sort that Gerbert ought to have ended up with anyway. It's amusing that despite being a literal succubus, Map almost condones Gerbert's choice to be with Meridiana by never referring to the succubus as wicked or evil, but rather appears to give her the benefit of the doubt. Map tells us that this woman began actively trying to win over Gerbert thereafter. She dressed specifically for him, spoke to him with reverence, addressed him with greater respect, and altogether attempted to hook him in. With the roles reversed, we can imagine that Gerbert took some satisfaction in spurning her this time, choosing to honour his commitment to Meridiana and reject this daughter of Babylon. Utterly at odds over how to win Gerbert back, the young woman consulted the local witch, who from Map's account we can infer gave her some sort of concoction or some kind of spell to make her irresistible. Either that or she just gave her a really good pep talk. In any case, the young woman spied Gerbert one evening laying down in the midst of a small orchard, where he proceeded to fall asleep after a night of eating and drinking. Seeing her opportunity to strike, the young woman undressed and roused him with kisses and embraces. As Gerbert was drunk, he easily gave in to the young woman. Map's account leads us to believe that he was able to pull away from her though, after remembering Meridiana's face. Overwhelmed with shame, he fled from the young woman and sought out Meridiana for forgiveness. Map tells us, long did she look down on him with disdain, but finally demanded his homage as security in view of his transgression. Gerbert, desperate to be forgiven, agreed to these terms as well. By this, it might be said that Meridiana requested worship. She had either been earnest with her affections and was now scorned by Gerbert, or she had been playing the long game, waiting for him to mess up so she could obtain his worship and damn him in the eyes of his god. I mean, either way, I'm pretty sure he'd be damned given what he's been doing, but at the very least, this shows us that Gerbert had well and truly gone the way of Solomon, and was now not only sexually defiant, but was now effectively appeasing an idol and a false god. Sometime after, the Archbishop of Rance died, and because of Gerbert's influence, he was elected to take his place. Whilst he was in this role, he was later considered and further elected to the role of Pope, a position you might say was owed all to the financial contributions of Meridiana, and her careful planning of his career. Of course, Gerbert, who'd by now changed his name to Sylvester II, was very aware that given that he was actively conferring with a demon, he was not exactly congruent with the duties of a pope. So when the sacrament of the Lord's body and blood was passed around, he never tasted them, either out of fear or respect, and either pretended to consume them or found ways to avoid them altogether. Meridiana appeared to him in the last year of his papacy and would tell him that he would live until he celebrated Mass in Jerusalem. That would be the day that he died. Hearing this, Gerbert was feeling pretty positive. This meant that so long as he didn't go to Jerusalem, he basically couldn't die. Considering he now lived in Rome, he probably wouldn't have been expected to ever make the trip at all. Yet the prophecy came with a Macbethian twist. It wasn't literal. One day, Gerbert was called to celebrate Mass at a church, where it was said that a board was laid up with Pilate affixed to the top of the Lord's cross, inscribed with the title of his passion, and that the name of this church was quite simply Jerusalem. When Gerbert realized where he was, and the fatal error he'd made in coming to this church, he caught the glimpse of Meridiana standing in the distance, clapping joyfully at his realization. Evidently, she had not forgiven his betrayal at all. Upon realizing this, Gerbert summoned all of the cardinals, the clergy, and the people, and he made it public that he had shared a bed with a succubus, had accepted her money, had listened to her counsel, and ultimately come to worship her. According to Map, Gerbert hallowed the short remainder of his life with severe penance. Some accounts report him cutting out his own tongue, and that he died in a good confession. He is said to be buried in the church of St. John Lateran, in a marble tomb, which is believed to sweat and rattle whenever the death of the current pope approaches. As to the fate of Meridiana, Walter Map, William of Malmesbury, and other historians remain quiet. Was this all just a game for the supposed succubus, who earned the glory of sullying the papacy with her puppet? Or did she truly love Gerbert, and only allowed for his downfall because he had scorned her? It's unlikely we will ever know. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to leave this video a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.